Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie in his late 30s, married for 5 years, discovers his wife's affair through a call from a friend. His wife planned to continue the affair while benefiting from their marriage. After gathering evidence, he confronts her dramatically, revealing her affair to both of their families. The affair ends, leading to divorce proceedings and repercussions for the mistress's husband. Now let's get into the story. One day, I, 38, was at work when I got a phone call from my good friend. I hadn't heard from him for a while. He opened his own pizza shop after we graduated college. His pizza shop and all the people I knew and loved lived in Des Moines now. I was married to my wife, 36, for 5 years at this point. We started taking karate lessons a year prior because both of us were determined to stay active. Nowadays, it's easy to just stay home or work from home, so I gained some weight. I was actually in the best shape of my life when I got this phone call from my pizza shop friend, Mr. Pepper. He told me that his frequent customer, a family law attorney, just met for lunch with a potential client. The client was my wife. Mr. Pepper told me she told the lawyer that she regrettably started an affair. But she didn't want to lose alimony payments in case she didn't stay with her lover. She was completely absorbed in herself and aimed to use me as much as she could after she cheated on me. I could not believe what he was telling me. I was a UPS driver, so I knew a lot of names in the town. I asked if Mr. Pepper overheard my wife give the name of her AP, knowing it was a long shot. He answered me right away like he knew I was going to ask, and it turned out to be our karate instructor. My mind was blown, my heart was breaking. I thought it was going to shrivel up and die. When it didn't, I decided I wouldn't let her get away with this. I worked my shift for UPS the next day and actually had a package for AP's wife, delivering it to their home address. I can't remember if it was that same day or next that my wife and I had a karate class together. A part of me didn't know why I hadn't confronted her yet, but I figured she couldn't divorce me in a matter of weeks, so I wouldn't let her know I was looking for evidence against her. My wife's sister was there at our karate class and told me she was kidnapping my wife for the night to talk about her recent breakup. Her acting was pretty convincing, but my wife's wasn't. She acted all surprised and bummed, like she planned on spending the evening with me at home. I wanted to scream at her, but I refrained. I left in her car alone but waited to see what happened. My wife's sister only stayed a few minutes before leaving alone. Then my wife came out with AP 10 minutes later and got into his car with him. They drove to his home address, and when I saw them getting out of the car, something overtook me. I drove my front tires up to the curb, right in front of AP's house and driveway, so that my headlights and high beams illuminated everything. I filmed as I got out of the car, making sure I showed their faces as I screamed to ask what was going on. They were so shocked. My wife asked what I was doing there, but AP thought it was better to run inside with her and lock the front door. The house went dark. I considered staying and waiting for her to come out, but I had my proof and my blood was pumping. I drove home and printed out large, blown-up stills of their faces in front of his house. I put these pictures inside a taped box with Mrs. AP's name. She must have been away when I delivered her last delivery because it was still on the porch in the video. So if she had more than one thing to open, I didn't think AP would even notice the package. With the box ready to go in my truck, my wife returned home, miserable and nervous. I said she had a lot of nerve to come back after what she did to me. She asked what I was talking about as if she didn't already know. So I told her I knew she was cheating on me with AP and that she met with a lawyer at the pizza shop. She was embarrassed and told me she was sorry. I told her she was a heartless cow for cheating on me while I tried to do something fun with her to learn self-defense together. I think she tried asking me for a second chance, but I could barely hear her because I was ranting about how unfair it was. I pointed out that she was only back home because AP was married and expecting his wife to return. My wife must have been an idiot because she gasped like she didn't know he was married. So that was the fault in her plan. She wanted to leave me and start an immediate happily ever after with AP, but had no idea he was married. She told me she didn't see any pictures of his wife in the house, and I just laughed. I told her AP's wife would be seeing pictures of her for certain. She looked scared and worried, but mostly just discouraged and broken because she knew she messed up. She thought she was getting a new husband easy as pie, but now she was losing the only one she had. I told her this was all her fault for her delusional thinking and inability to see just how much I mattered to her and how much I didn't deserve this. At this point, I made it clear she wouldn't be staying in the house as long as I was here because she was the one that ruined our marriage. She went to her sister's house. The next day, after I dropped off the package for AP's wife with the incriminating photos and note, my wife's sister came over and told me the truth about the night at the karate place. My wife had told her that I was emotionally abusive and would freak out if she wanted a night out without me. That's why she lied and didn't want to say anything to me. Now she knew the truth because my wife arrived at her house the night before, crying all over the place about what a terrible person she was. Sounds about right. AP's wife obviously freaked out when she got the photos and my anonymous note. She filed for divorce, and as a consequence, AP lost his karate dojo. Today's second story. In this story, Opie is deeply in love with his wife, Emily, despite their busy lives. He was a hard-working man, and she was a remote worker. They struggled to spend time together. Emily's affair came to light when he followed her and found her with her high school sweetheart. Devastated, he ended the marriage, realizing her betrayal. Despite his efforts, she left, pregnant with the other man's child, leaving him hurt but resolved to move on. Now let's get into the story. I am 35 and my ex-wife Emily is 30. As of the time I write this story, Emily and I had been married for more than 5 years and I loved her so much. The truth is we go a long way back as we grew up in the same community and attended the same school at a particular point in our lives. I was way ahead of her in class, and though we weren't together like the typical high school lovers, we met when I was my late 20s. We dated and broke up a couple of times, but in the end we realized we could not stay without each other because we were so deeply in love. I worked for a top construction company, and because of my busy schedule, I was barely at home to spend time with my ex-wife. She complained a couple of times, but she knew I was out there making money and trying to close deals so I could afford the kind of lifestyle she wanted. Emily was a remote worker. She worked from home and her job kind of gave her enough time to do the things she liked, hang out with her friends, and she could even afford to put off her work for a couple of hours to watch her favorite television shows. But it was not so for me. If I wasn't inspecting a particular site or trying to buy an old house for renovation, I was working on site, and by the time I came back home, I would be so exhausted. And this went on for a while. I tried to make it up to Emily as much as I could. During the weekend, we'd go out, just the two of us, jump on a mini vacation whenever we could, and I bought her expensive stuff just as my way to make up for my unavailability. She loved all of those things, and she understood that I was doing the most to make her happy. We didn't have a child yet because she said she was not ready to be a mom. And besides, she wanted me to make more money so our child could have the best life, get a good education, and not have to struggle as we did in the early stages of our lives. Though I tried to talk to her a lot of times about it, I even explained to her that they were people who were not earning as much as we did, but they had a comfortable family and they were all happy. But she kept insisting that when the time was right, she would let me know, so I backed off. All along, I did not know that Emily was having an affair behind me, and she was so good at hiding it. It all began when I came home a bit early from work one day, and she was preparing to go to a meeting. She had her makeup on, wore a beautiful blue tight dress, released her blonde hair, and wore a pair of black heels. That did not look like an ideal meeting outfit to me, but I shook it off. When she returned home that evening, she was covered in a strong, masculine cologne, and when I asked her about it, she said she hugged a couple of people after the meeting, and she could not tell where the cologne came from. I bought that too and let it slide. But she raised my suspicions when she declined our mini vacation just because she wanted to be a part of her girls' hangout, which could have been rescheduled, and she claimed she had more reunion meetings to attend. I understood that she was the treasurer of her class, but it just did not make any sense for her to turn down traveling with me for a school reunion meeting and her girls' hangout. She knew how much I worked my ass off, and she knew I was not going to be getting a long break anytime soon. And besides, it had been months since we spent quality time together. So after she attended her meetings 3 times that week alone, I knew something was off, and I decided to find out on that particular day. She said she was going on a girls' night out with her friends, but she would be sleeping at one of her friends' houses that night. I knew Emily was a social butterfly. She just wanted to be a part of everything, but my instincts told me she was lying. She showed no iota of concern about leaving me at home, despite knowing that I really wanted to be with her. The funny thing was, she spent the whole day picking out what to wear and was more concerned about her looks than the outing itself, which was very unlike her. I had a backup phone and I left it in her car while I pretended to see her off that evening. It was hard for me, but I had to be sure I wasn't making things up in my head. Some minutes after she left, I phoned one of her friends and told her that I wanted to surprise Emily that night, and I asked where they'd be hanging out, but from the way she sounded confused on the phone, it was obvious there was no girls' night out. And Emily lied to me. A part of me wanted to let it slide, and another part of me needed to know what was going on. I followed my tracker, and it led me to a fancy restaurant far from her friend's house where they were all supposed to meet up. I must say that stepping out of my car to see Emily cuddled and being fed by her high school sweetheart was stomach-racking for me that night. I recognized him instantly. He was a guy that went to the same high school as us. I knew she was up to something, but I was definitely not expecting to see her with David of all people. Anyway, I did not create a scene. I just made sure she saw me, and I walked back to my car. The moment she saw me, she ran after me, but I drove off. And I was thinking she'd drive after me immediately, but she didn't. I got home before she did, and I didn't hesitate to throw her things out of the house. By the time she returned, she was a complete mess. Her eyelids were swollen from crying, and she tried to beg me to forgive her and give her a second chance, but that was the worst form of betrayal. I asked her to go back to David, and that's when she flipped and told me she was leaving anyway. She said I wasn't giving her attention, barely spent time with her, she didn't feel loved, and David was a better man than I was. She even told me she was pregnant for David, and she even wanted to do me a favor and tell me the child was mine. Unfortunately, had enough for one night, so I asked her to give to David what belonged to David, and I threw her out. A couple of months later, we divorced, and by then her baby bump was so visible, it didn't take long before David ghosted her, and she had to deal with the baby all by herself and pay for her rent. And do multiple jobs just to get things going. To even think that I never asked her to contribute to the rent or some of the bills at home. I paid all of them by myself, and I never complained. Yet she never appreciated any of that. It was her loss because I did all I could to treat her right. And I was faithful. But I have moved on now though. It was hard, but I know I'm going to be open to being with someone better pretty soon.